The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or also known as TRC, is the government-run commission that is dedicated to correct the wrong actions that Canada has committed against Indigenous people.
The TRC was established on June 1st, 2008, and sadly, the last residential school in Canada closed in 1996.
So you may be wondering what reconciliation even is.
Reconciliation is about maintaining a respectful and peaceful relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people in Canada. And this is where the calls to actions come in.
One of the calls to action states that we should call upon the federal, provincial, and territorial and Indigenous governments to develop culturally appropriate parenting programs for Indigenous families.
This is a call to the government to provide Indigenous people with the right parenting programs that are appropriate with their culture so they are able to raise their kids right.
Due to the residential schools, the trauma, fear, and pain not only affected the people who attended the residential schools, but also their kids and even their kids' kids.
These awful issues are passed down from generation to generation. Due to depression, trauma, pain, and substance use, Indigenous parents are not able to properly raise their kids as they would want.
Victims cannot help their kids when they can't even help themselves, which is why parenting programs that relate to Indigenous culture is necessary for the future generations for Indigenous people. We can support Indigenous communities by asking our local authorities to make sure that we have a parenting program in around our area to support Indigenous parents.
We can also help by teaching the subject to the school and seek any Indigenous students who think they may need a similar program.
My name is Jamie Kishko, and I am from Chippewa-the-Thames First Nations Reserve. And I'm here today answering a couple of questions. And the first question was, so I found out about residential schools when I was about 16 years old. I found out that my grandma attended it's called the Mush Hole, and it's on my reserve, Chippewa-the-Thames. She didn't talk about her experiences there, so I didn't find out really anything like her experience until I was about 20 years old, because she wouldn't talk about it. She's published, Elizabeth Graham published a book on it, and it's here in this library actually. And then I was about 16 when I first heard about them, 20 when my grandma went into detail about her experiences. Okay, so the last residential school closed in 1996. So for people to say to get over it or it happened in the past, 1996 is not in the past. So the things that Canadians can do now, they can support initiatives. So when you see something like this is in London. But when you see something like this, if there's events or anything going on like this, you should educate yourself. Take full advantage of anything that comes across your path like this, because knowledge, that's the best weapon we have and the best way we get support, right? Because everybody thinks that, most of the survivors are probably old and therefore passed on, but there are day school survivors, right? So there's a day school settlement coming out now about people who attended these schools on reserves. That's coming out. There's also other things, the 60 Scoop. These are all interrelated to residential school. So the impact that residential school had on Indigenous people here on Turtle Island, which is what my people call Canada and US, it had far-reaching impacts. I'm a second generation intergenerational survivor. So my grandma went, my dad experienced it to a certain extent. And then by the time it got to me, we moved away from the reserve. So my education, I received it off reserve. So I'm not a part of that, the day school settlement. But any initiatives taken to educate, to make Canadians aware, any initiative like that could be greatly supported by a lot more Canadians. So that's what I think should be done.
This generation and the upcoming generations can stop the cycle.
We can be the generation to put an end to this.